So, this morning was all about collaboration. Our next panel is all about what's happening elsewhere. Learning from each other's experience is crucial. So I'd like to invite to the stage Philip Nugent from the Department of Environment, Climate and Communications, Neva Nachtigal from Reuse, Fiona Deere from the Restart Project, and Claire Downey from the Rediscovery Centre. Please welcome to the stage. Okay, so same format as this morning. We'll get a brief chat from each of them, a brief presentation as to who they are and what they do, and we'll have a chat afterwards. So it seems right that our first place to look should be our immediate neighbour to the south. Philip Nugent is the Assistant Secretary at the Department of Environment, Climate and Communications in Ireland, where he leads on the circular economy and governance. He's also responsible for policy across mineral exploration and mining, petroleum exploration and extraction, the Geological Survey of Ireland, inland fisheries and waste and resource efficiency. Philip. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Good morning, everybody. Thank you very much for the invitation. It's a pleasure to be here with you today in a beautiful location. So I'm going to rattle through my slides. I've got about twice as many as I would normally have. So I will be brief on most of them. So I'm going to start with a bit of policy context, where we've come from over the last few years, and then towards the end talk about where we're at the moment in terms of support for reuse and repair. So the policy context is National Circular Economy Strategy, published in 2021, preceded by a Waste Action Plan for a Circular Economy in 2020, delivered within about a month of the current government taking office. The transition of the EPA's former National Waste Prevention Programme to become the National Circular Economy Programme, and then the National Waste Management Plan for a Circular Economy, which was published earlier this year by the three regional offices who deliver local authority waste management planning services, and we've gone from 3 regional waste management plans into one single national waste management plan. Just some of the logos from the various documents there, and here are some of the specific things that I'll talk about a little bit more in terms of deposit return scheme, green public procurement strategy. Thank you. Circular Economy Innovation Grant Scheme, and also the work that we're doing with Circle Economy on our circularity gap report. So the first circular economy strategy, as I say, published in December 2021. The overall approach set out the overall approach to the circular economy. It was really about socializing the concept, explaining what it was, and to try to demystify and to give people practical examples of what the circular economy is. So ranging from the highly evolved and technical end of things in terms of, for example, industrial symbiosis, down to the really practical things like choosing to use a reusable cup, getting a pair of shoes repaired, etc., etc. So to try to demystify, to simplify the concept to people and to make it clear to them that they're actually doing circular things every day, or if they aren't doing circular things every day, well, their parents were, or their grandparents were, by darning socks, that kind of thing. That's a circular economy action. Using Spotify as a circular economy action, using Netflix as a circular economy action, because it's about a product as service instead of buying a new thing yourself. There's also a commitment in the circular economy strategy to revise it on an ongoing basis. And that's why we're working now on the strategy 2.0. So this has a statutory basis underpinned by the Circular Economy Act, and it will include circularity targets for different sectors, including agriculture, construction, retail, packaging, textiles, and electronic equipment. We'll probably move earliest on the construction side of things, because about 9 million tonnes of construction and demolition waste is produced every year in Ireland. We believe about 6 million of that is potentially reusable. So we're going after things like ending recovery levy exemptions for C&D waste, removing landfill levies for C&D waste, really going after Article 27, 28 byproduct and end of waste notifications on a national level for certain C&D products. The targets to be set out must include any or all of the following. So reductions in material resource consumption, increases in the use of reusable products, increased levels of repair and reuse of products, and improved maintenance and optimized uses of goods, products and materials. And it'll be action oriented, or it must be action oriented. The first The first version, as I said, was kind of about demystifying, explaining the concept, not very actions focused, and any actions that were in there were focused on our department or local authorities or the EPA, so the kind of the statutory family, if you like. The next version must be much more outward looking and include actions for the various industries and sectors of the economy. It'll be based on a comprehensive and detailed analysis of national material flows. So again, our first was high level policy based. What we don't have, but which Northern Ireland does have, is a circularity gap report. So we will be learning from your example, and that will be the primary input to developing the next version of the circular economy strategy. So the gap report will size our circularity gap. We have a figure at the moment that our circularity rate is about 1.9% behind the EU average, which is 12%. And that those measures that I mentioned in terms of construction, we think could double or treble our circularity rate pretty quickly. But the honest truth is we don't really know. So we need to understand further how raw materials are processed and assembled to become the products that address the country's needs. So the circularity gap report will measure our gap and provide a starting point to identify where the different sectors and supply chains should focus strategies to achieve the transition. It'll set out the measures to get us there. It'll set out how the circular transition will impact the labour market and examine jobs and skills as levers for change. And it'll examine how circular strategies can address challenges in the individual sectors. So we have some preliminary work from Circular Economy, and we met earlier this week with stakeholders to go through some of these key messages that are emerging. So we know that we have a material and carbon intensive economy that has relatively high and tightly coupled material and carbon footprints. We have just 3 industries that contribute to the 64% of our material footprint and 38% of the carbon footprint. Our circularity indicator set shows how all of the materials consumed in the Irish economy, of all the materials consumed in the Irish economy, around half are consumed are biomass. Over half of all materials consumed are going into stock buildup. The share of secondary materials is very low. The level of circular jobs is low, but not really different to other EU countries. And there's an inverse correlation between material and carbon intensive sectors and their level of circular employment. So key scenarios that have been proposed to us already for closing the gap are to shift to a circular food system, to advance circular manufacturing, embrace circular consumer goods, build a circular built environment, and redesign mobility. And we're aiming to have a final report published in September 2024 and hopefully a second version of the circular economy strategy by the end of this year. And all of this comes on the back of the Waste Action Plan for a Circular Economy 2020 to 2025. And this had high level ambitions around, for example, actions that we would impose on the waste collection system to get us towards where we need to in terms of our recycling rates for 2025 and beyond. And then things like introduction of a deposit return scheme, establishment of a textile advisory group, to promote eco-design for textiles in collaboration with designers and retailers. And then also trying to anticipate what would come at an EU level in terms of Sustainable Products Initiative, because we realised at that time that while there are lots of things that we would like to do in terms of repairability of goods, we're much more able to do those things as part of the EU market. So we have a National Textiles Advisory Group, and this was to deliver on our commitment to tackle the environmental degradation caused by textile waste in close collaboration with relevant stakeholders. It's chaired by an industry expert, Gwen Cunningham, and the Textile Advisory Group, which was established in 2022, brings together all of the expertise that we need, because again, one of the key things that we've learned in recent years is that the circular economy transition, or even delivering change in the waste sector, is not something that a government department can do on its own. It's much bigger than that. So we have a waste advisory group, and it's really a circular economy advisory group, I would say at this stage, that brings in all of the stakeholders, and it's a two-way channel of communication. So we bring things to the group, but we also expect the group to use their reach to bring messages from our group to them, because they have reach into a stakeholder group that we just don't have. I'll just flick through the next one. So we have a GPP strategy, which was published earlier this year. 14% of EU GDP is through government procurement or public procurement. So very important to harness that reach and to achieve the policy outcomes that we want through green public procurement. There's one that I want to get to. Too many visuals here, sorry. really what I wanted to get to was the National Waste Management Plan. Well, actually, I'll just focus on this for one moment if I can. So we have a national reuse and repair network. So the purpose is to facilitate knowledge sharing and engagement to support and scale reuse and repair activities in Ireland. And the network provides a national overview of reuse and repair activities, avoiding duplication of work and identifying opportunities to work collaboratively to deliver strategic priorities. So the steering group has it's ourselves, the EPA and the local government sector, but we also have diverse membership to inform the work that we do at the National Reuse and Repair Network. So it's a very important resource for us. I'll skip through that one, and just to focus on, I don't know if you can see this, but I'll leave this slide, you can circulate it afterwards. But one of the things that we said in the Waste Action Plan for a Circular Economy was that the National Waste Management Plan would include targets for reuse and repair. And that wasn't us just sidestepping the idea of targets and putting an obligation on the local government sector. We knew that that's where it's much more effective in terms of the direct levers that they have. So we're really delighted that the local government sector did come together, and they have included targets for reuse and repair in the National Waste Management Plan. Funding is going to be a key issue there, and we have a Circular Economy Fund which is made up of revenues from the landfill levy, recovery levy and plastic bag levy, and soon to include the coffee cup levy. And that's going to be a key enabler of circular economy transition and support for really innovative reuse and repair initiatives. We had our Circular Economy Innovation Grant Scheme 2024, just call for proposals issued about 2 weeks ago. It's only going to go one way in terms of the level of funding that's available for that. So between the National Waste Management Plan and the Circular Economy Innovation Grant Scheme, we think that that's going to be a really powerful enabler of reuse and repair into the future. So thank you.
Philip, thanks so much. I hope that wasn't too off-putting, me wiggling a couple of fingers at you. So thank you so much. So next, for the last year, Neva Nachtigal has been the Director of Reuse, Europe's largest network of reuse, repair and recycling social enterprises. She came to the role with a background in journalism and international policy, research and communications, focused on social and economic justice, sustainability and human rights. Neva.
Hello, let me start my stopwatch because I will otherwise not keep the time. It is such a pleasure and privilege to be here. Thank you so much for the invitation. It's my first time in Northern Ireland, and based on the landscapes I've seen and people I have encountered, I really wholeheartedly hope it won't be the last. I'm really very positively impressed, so thank you for having me here. Indeed, I will speak a bit from the European perspective. Because I work for a network of networks of social enterprises in the circular economy. And I intend to tell you a bit today about what we do, what our members do, and then I'll get to probably what you're most interested in, namely how the policy has been mainstreaming reuse and repair across Europe. So as you heard, we're Europe's largest network of social enterprises active in reuse, repair and recycling. This is a very dense map. And your social enterprises here in Northern Ireland would also actually be part of this, because we consider social enterprises that are members of our members also being in our network. So welcome to all of you. If you didn't know, you are also a member of the network I am from. So this is the logos of our members from across Europe, and Northern Ireland Resources Network is one of our newest members, and we are really very happy to have you with us and excited to see what the future holds for us. What we stand for, well, our mission is to empower, represent and support the community, also the community in this room. And we have a vision of an inclusive circular economy that is based on reuse and repair, in solidarity with both people and the environment. I'll go a bit quickly through these slides, but basically we have a growing recognition at the EU level, which is where I predominantly work, also among allies and environmental and social organizations, that these social enterprises in the circular economy fulfill a role that nobody else fulfills. What our members do, and I'm sorry, the slides got a little wonky, they collect, sort and redistribute 26 different, I'll call them material streams rather than waste streams, that are very diverse, from furniture, textiles, to tires, paint, anything you can think of. They promote these best circular and social practices. Very importantly, they make essential goods available to households, people from all income levels. So they actually tackle poverty in that way. They provide jobs, training, and skills. So they promote social inclusion, and they advocate for an enabling environment at various levels. Quickly about impact, the most important figure that we like to quote is that the members create about 70 jobs per 1,000 tons of waste, here it's waste, collected with a view of being reused. We also talk about economic impacts, so the members run 2,400 secondhand shops, have quite large turnover, and also have large environmental impacts that you can find on our website, and hopefully we'll have this presentation available later as well. The organization that I represent, so Reuse, we're based in Brussels. I lead the secretariat of this network. We coordinate the network, we try to facilitate exchange of best practice, foster partnerships. We take part in our international projects ourselves. We gather data, like you saw before, to showcase members' impact, and I'm getting inspired by the way you are presenting yours, so I will take some photos and notes home. And we sit in a lot of rooms like this one, perhaps not as nice as this one, but we advocate for the sector, and we try to predominantly work on creating an enabling policy environment for the kinds of organizations that you work in. We publish various reports, conduct research. These are some recent examples. So for example, we showcased how our members build skills that are relevant in the circular economy. We do this a lot on case study basis. So we really want to present an actual social circular enterprise and the work it does, so that the policymakers also understand what this means. It's not just some abstract concepts. We talk about public procurement. We really like to talk about green and socially responsible public procurement, and we advocate for all the policies to link the two areas, so the green and the social agenda. And we recently published this for a job-rich and inclusive circular economy, which was in the context of EU elections. So this is sort of our priorities for the next term that we also want the policymakers to take on. Now I go to the measures. That's probably the most interesting part. I'll start with what the EU is doing. So some of the recent breakthroughs, let's say, one is the Council recommendation. So this is by all member states' representatives. They agreed with a really overwhelming support on developing social economy framework conditions. So we expect that in the next few years, this will be a very, very important policy measure for our members to advocate at the national level for an enabling policy environment. And crucially, and we really can trace our own impact there, even though this is not an environmental type of measure, we managed to get social economy actors in circular economy specifically included in the recommendation. Currently, the Waste Framework Directive is being revised at the EU level. And very importantly, so far, all EU institutions have recognized social enterprises' tremendous role in reusing textiles. So we're hoping that this goes through, but so far the Parliament, the Council, and the Commission agree on this vital role. Another very important thing that happened is the Right to Repair Directive. It's of course a first step and fell short in many ways, but quite importantly also for what you do as an inspiration. So it's some steps toward fair access to spare parts, introducing national financial incentives for repair, and to increase the visibility of reuse and repair. And now this comes more to the level of what states, countries can do. So, I call this the toolbox. It seems fitting for the reuse and repair conversation. There are really very many options for policy interventions. And in fact, I don't have enough time to go through all of this, but every bullet point there already has an example in practice. So it's very important to recognize the certifications by skill providers and the social and circular economy. The green and socially responsible public procurement is a major policy instrument the public authorities have on hand. You can lobby here also for reduced or zero VAT on repair services. That's a very important tool that public authorities have on hand. There can be tax deductions for consumers or subsidies for consumers opting for repair. We advocate strongly for quantitative reuse and repair targets. Currently, they're usually lumped together, if at all, with recycling. But that's a very, very important thing, and it's our next big advocacy point. And of course, extended producer responsibility. And as I go now to very specific examples, I will show where and why this is so relevant. So one concrete example comes from France. So what countries can do, they introduced a repairability index that will be replaced soon with a durability index. It's mandatory in France since 2021. It focuses on electrical and electronic equipment, and basically it gives a 1 to 10 score, this is for consumer information, on repairability of the items they're buying. And this score is composed of various elements, and it has made quite a difference, I think, in consumer awareness. And Belgium followed suit, so they introduced the same measure last year. I have 2 timers, and I'm being told by both that I have to wrap up, but I'm almost there. And then this one is, I think, especially also really relevant, is the repair bonus. I put up the example of Austria, not to speak only about France. In there, it was launched in 2022, covers almost all electronic and electrical equipment. And basically, consumers can download vouchers from just online that will cover up to 50% of the repair cost estimate. And here, this was based on a pilot in the city of Vienna, where they then ran a survey, or they presented data that 9 out of 10 items could be repaired. France has a similar bonus, a repair bonus, for electrical and electronic equipment since 2022. And then last year, they added textiles and shoes. The big difference between the two, I mean, they have a flat rate payment depending on the product. The main difference, and something to take into account when designing these measures, is that in Austria, the funding came from an EU COVID response package. And so it's a certain bag of money, and this repair bonus will be available as long as the money lasts. Whereas in France, they are funding this from sort of the extended producer responsibility concept. So producer responsibility organizations are the ones that have to provide the funding for this. And that's probably the best way forward to ensure that these measures can be supported. All right, and now I will leave you with why this matters. I mean, you know why it matters yourselves, but I'm very happy to say that in our efforts on Waste Framework Directive, we mobilized over 80 social and environmental NGOs in Europe to sign to say that this is an environmental imperative, as well as a catalyst for inclusive economic and social development. Thank you very much. Thank you.
Niva, thank you so much. Next up we have Fiona Dare, co-director of the Restart project based in London, which aims to keep our electronics in use for longer through repair and reuse. And she has spent more than 15 years engaging public audiences in environmental issues. Fiona.
Thanks for having me. The Restart project is quite a small charity with the not so small aim of fixing our relationship with electronics. So we're quite busy. But we started about 12 years ago, kind of out of frustration, which I'm sure a lot of us, and actually the general public shares, that things break too quickly. When they break, you kind of know it's just a small bit of it, but it's really hard to get repaired. And then that frustration that we all have, when you have to throw something away, that you know that kind of like 98% of it is fine and it's just one little bit. So we wanted to kind of to change that in various ways. We do a lot, we support repair cafes in London and across the UK with the Community Repair Network, but we also campaign, and that's what I'm going to talk about here because I don't need to talk to you about community repair. So I'm going to talk about right to repair, what we have in the UK. There's actually quite a lot of overlap, which is probably a good thing between me and Neva. But yeah, so we have right to repair rules in the UK. They were introduced in 2021 and they were introduced as part of an EU package, and we were locked in before Brexit happened. but they're not, I mean, they're very kind of scratching the surface. They're for white goods and TVs only. They only apply to repair professionals. And sorry, I'm just going to step back and explain what this means. So the right to repair regulations mean that you should be able to get spare parts and repair manuals for these for white goods and TVs for at least 10 years after the product has gone off the market. So the idea is that it's kind of removing those barriers to repair that get put in the way by manufacturers. But they are limited, and as the EU legislation has evolved, the EU legislation now covers smartphones and tablets. The UK legislation hasn't evolved at all. So there's a lot that we've got to do, and the challenge in the UK, and I came from climate campaigning, so I was used to it being the issue that lots of people talked about, is that repair and reuse is not a prominent issue. And an MP that we worked with recently nailed it when she said that repair is so obvious that it just gets forgotten, and like very few people object to repair. But also very few people, not including people in this room, get really, really excited about it, right? So that's our challenge. How do we kind of raise the profile? What this means is that we end up throwing away a load of stuff that could be reused. So we did a study of an e-waste bin, an electrical waste bin in a waste facility last year. We found that a third of the products weren't even broken. They were still working, but they'd been sent for recycling. Another 10% of the products were very easily repairable. There were others that needed a complicated repair, but that adds up to about half of that e-waste bin that's being sent for shredding and recycling that could have been kept in use. And when you scale that up to, you know, our global e-waste mountain that weighs more than the Great Wall of China each year, if you could cut that in half and keep that in use, how much difference would that make? So we're doing a follow-up to that project, which we're calling Beyond Recycling of E-Waste, and it's a bit of a citizen science project. So we're looking at how much reuse is actually happening in our waste facilities, and we're going to contrast that with what people are expecting, because we know that people think recycling actually also means repair and reuse. And I think that people will be really surprised to see how little of it is actually kept in use. We'll be launching that on Repair Day in October. This has gone a bit squiffy too. But so our main campaigning tool at the moment is we've got a repair and reuse declaration. There are some copies of it at the back and some leaflets on it if you want to kind of take some away. And so we're calling for a lot of the same policies that Neva just spoke about. We know that one of the biggest barriers to repair is cost. So we want measures to make a repair more affordable. So tax reductions, repair vouchers, inspired by other countries that have done that. We want to expand our right to repair regulations so they cover all electronic products and that these spare parts and product information is available to everybody. We want people to be able to choose more repairable products, and as Nova said, that shifts consumer behaviour, and that has a knock-on effect on the manufacturers, because then they make products more repairable, and we've seen that happening. But it also gives a really important message to consumers when at the point of sale, when they're buying something, that this is a repairable product, that, you know, when the warranty runs out, you don't just throw it away, you can still repair it. So that's really important. We really think we need reuse targets, and reuse targets are what would shift that dynamic that I was just talking about. At the moment, we only have recycling targets, and they actually disincentivize waste processors and manufacturers to do any reuse because they're so busy trying to meet their recycling targets, and that's just perverse. So we need targets, and we need more repair skills. If repair is going to become the norm, we need more people who can do it. So the declaration is a thing that any groups can sign up to. So if you're not signed up already, you can either sign up online or get some of the materials at the back. And we're also trying to get lots of politicians to sign up. And we've got just over 30 MPs. We've had a bit of a pause for the moment, but we'll be back on it in a couple of days. And then just talking about a couple of things that have happened. So I talked about us, there'd been kind of nothing happening in the UK since we got our right to repair regulations. But there have been a couple of opportunities lately. There was a bill called the Digital Markets Bill that came through Parliament at the start of this year. And that was about consumer rights. But there was a visionary peer who happened to have a conversation with one of our trustees in a toilet somewhere, and got on board with the right to repair. And she saw the opportunity that right to repair is a consumer rights issue. So we were working to try and get an amendment into that bill. Unfortunately, it didn't pass, but it was a really good opportunity to kind of get a sense of where the support was, and also have conversations with the government departments. So our environment department, DEFRA, tends to lead on this, but it's also in the camp of Department of Net Zero, and they in themselves, it just highlighted all of these things where they didn't really know who was responsible for it. So the more that we have those conversations, the more that we can kind of join things up. So that was an opportunity that we didn't manage to kind of push through. The other one is that there's a WEEE, or Waste Electricals reform consultation, and that was 3 years overdue. And there was a consultation which was uninspiring. It was all about recycling, as usual. All of the legislation on waste is about recycling. But there was also a call for evidence, and that was what was quite interesting, because that asked questions about reuse targets and also about eco-labelling. So that's sort of the same sort of thing as a repair index. So we'd only just launched the declaration, but what was great is so we had this kind of network of supportive groups, and we were able to provide some templates so that small groups who kind of actually, if you're not in this space, it's quite hard to even understand the questions because they're really policy focused. But we were able to help a few of them respond and sort of translate it into human. Oh, there we go. Yes. This is a funny slide. So I was just going to talk about an event that's not too dissimilar to this one that we had a couple of months ago in Parliament. So we had a repair cafe in Westminster, and it was an absolute nightmare getting tools into Parliament, I will tell you that. But we managed it, and it was great because we brought this kind of microcosm of the people that signed up to the declaration. We had repair cafes from across the UK. We had some kind of national campaigning organisations and businesses. We teamed up with Back Market to do it. And it was brilliant. And the buzz in the room was just so inspiring that it just kind of now I have this vision of a mass lobby stroke repair cafe in Parliament where we can invite everybody that we want along, because it was just really striking the power of connecting constituency voices with politicians. And we know that both are important because we've been really trying hard to get MPs to sign up through constituency pressure, and some were signing up. But it's really hard to get cut through. But then we brought them to Westminster. Almost every MP that came in the room asked if there was a constituent there. Like half of those that came because they were invited. So it just really shows the importance of that kind of national level and constituency level. And if you bring it together in the right way, that's how we get repair up the agenda. So just a little bit on what's next. So on Friday, we get back on to trying to get lots of more MPs signing up to the declaration, and we'll be engaging with new ministers. And this is one of the things we were talking about earlier. Because repair is kind of spread across everything. So the asks in the declaration actually relate to 5 or 6 government departments. So we'll be kind of trying to get in touch with them and making sure that they are aware of what the public is calling for here. And then we've got Repair Day on the 19th of October. So we're really just saying that the whole of October is going to be about repair. So we're encouraging repair cafes to get in touch with newly elected MPs, say congratulations, but then also say, come and celebrate repair with us in October, because it's also the 15th anniversary of repair cafes in general. So it's a really nice way of a really nice positive way of getting politicians to engage. And then, as many of you will know, once they've been at a repair cafe, then it just switches them onto it. We'll be launching the citizen science research about reuse and waste facilities. So that'll be the slightly more kind of harder hitting side of things, and ongoing engagement, because what we found is that we've just got to respond to opportunities. We've got this policy platform, and then things come up and we just need to be ready to go. And then the other thing that we've learned from our work in the last 6 months is that we're really keen to build up business support a bit. And we know that there will be a lot of businesses that can't sign up to all of the asks in the declaration, but there'll be some surprising allies actually that really support some policies. So we want to try and build up some coalitions around them. And then again, the more different types of stakeholders you have talking about the same issue, the more likely we are to get cut through. So that's it from me. I'm absolutely delighted to be here, and I think bringing repair cafes to Parliament is the way forward. So thank you very much for having me.
Thank you so much, Fiona. Thank you. Next, Claire Downey is the Policy and Research Director at the Rediscovery Centre in Dublin, where she focuses on providing an evidence base for policy development and circular living models. She also leads the education team in circular economy education and brings her connections with a wide number of organisations, including some represented here today, to the table.
Okay, thank you very much. And thank you to Northern Ireland Resources Network also for having us today. So I'm going to talk about what's happening in Ireland through the lens of people and practitioners and a teeny bit of policy as well. So as mentioned, I work at the Rediscovery Centre, where the National Centre for Circular Economy, we're located in Dublin, in an old industrial space that's been reused as a demonstration centre for the circular economy. And our mission is to lead the transition to the circular economy. But as a social enterprise, it's really important to us that that transition is fair and inclusive, as well as keeping within our natural resource boundaries. So we put people and communities at the heart of this transition, and that's why I'm going to start by talking about people and where we are in Ireland at the moment. There've been quite a lot of studies recently in Ireland on people's attitudes and behaviours, and we've already talked quite a bit about attitudes and behaviours towards this area, circular economy, reuse, repair. We've done studies ourselves, supported by the Department of Environment, into attitudes and behaviours towards the circular economy more broadly, and that found that the recognition of the term, what is circular economy, is low but growing, so still under half of people recognise that term, and that real understanding of what circular economy means is very low. But what we are seeing is that people are engaging in circular economy behaviours to some extent. So 66% of people have done something in the last 12 months, like repair, like reuse, like lending. So that's positive. We also see that that audience is roughly split in half, the general population, between what we're calling sustainably minded individuals and mainstream individuals, and that the engagement, unsurprisingly, from sustainably minded individuals is much higher. So as you can see here, in terms of repair, 75% of sustainably minded people have done something or are likely to repair in the last 12 months. Compared to only 22% of the mainstream audience. And we see something similar here around lending. So what this shows us, I suppose, is we really need to find ways to bring that mainstream audience along with us, but that there are people already bought in, which is also really positive. The EPA has also done quite a lot of studies on behavioural insights. There's 8 up on their website at the moment if you're interested in this area. And I've just picked out 2, one on reuse and one on repair. And what the reuse study shows us is that quite a lot of people, 90%, have donated or passed something on for reuse in the last 12 months, which is really high engagement, although somehow only 34% of people know where their local reuse centre is. So I'm not quite sure how that works. But half of that number have actually bought something or accepted something secondhand. So we really need to see that figure changing, obviously. Around half of those from charity shops and a third of those from online. We do see people engaging in secondhand for cost reasons, which is good, but we also see 2/3 of people saying that they have concerns around quality of secondhand goods. So we still have to address those negative perceptions. In terms of lending, renting, borrowing, we see much less engagement in this type of behaviour, primarily around borrowing bikes. So obviously the bike schemes are working really well. But there's a lot of interest in libraries of things, in tool libraries. Unsurprisingly for Ireland, the engagement in this is really low because we have very few operating at the moment. So as a profile of who is a reuser in Ireland, the high reusers tend to be female and tend to be in the age bracket 35 to 54 years old. As a guide. If we turn to repair, we see a lot more awareness of where is my local repair service, which is good. We do see high levels of engagement, but this is actually over the last 5 years, so it's a little bit longer. And we also see people are using professional services, which is good for repair. Interestingly, to some of the conversations we had earlier, 2/3 of people say that they can stitch and sew. 2/3 of people say they do small DIY repairs, and 1/3 of people say they do electrical repairs at home, which is also quite surprising. But a lot of people want to learn more repair skills. So I think that's really positive in terms of the enthusiasm for repair. Our figures around repair cafes are not very high here. The awareness of what is a repair cafe is extremely low. Attendance of repair cafes is extremely low, but there's a lot of interest in them. And I will come back to that point shortly in terms of practice. And then in terms of what motivates people to repair, more information, videos, help in doing repair would motivate people. It's a cost saving, and people are seeing the connection to climate. So it's a good news story, I suppose, in terms of the interest in repair. But we do know too what people say and what people do can be quite different. So we'll look at what is actually happening in Ireland at the moment in terms of reuse. So there has been a major study into reuse in Ireland, and this looked at developing a method for how we measure what is reuse. It specifically focuses on retail of secondhand goods and online retail of secondhand goods, so physical and online. And what this study found, that's called Q to Reuse, was that there are around 1,300 reuse operators of that type in the country, and around half of those are social enterprises and charities. So that shows the really important role that social enterprises play in this space. The baseline figure that we got from that study was around 6.5 kilos per person is being reused at the moment. And the EPA subsequently did another study, which was a citizen survey. So that's asking you, how much did you reuse in the last year? And that includes all channels. So hand-me-downs, passing something on to your neighbor, as well as what you buy secondhand from a retail store or online. And that found that the reuse figure is around 10. So we're somewhere between 6.5 and 10. I suppose that really pales in comparison when you look at how much waste we're generating, which is 360 kilos per person. In terms of repair, we have much less data, but there is a study we're expecting to see shortly from the EPA on repair activity in Ireland. At the Rediscovery Centre, we did some EPA-funded research into insurance and the barriers that repair cafes are facing in Ireland, which explains why the earlier figure of engagement in repair cafes is quite low. That study found that there are about 10 to 15 active repair cafes at the moment, but that insurance, particularly for repair of electrical goods, is a real challenge. We also have a national directory called Repair My Stuff for repair organisations, and that has around 1,300 repair centres registered to the directory, which is, I suppose, a good number as well. Just circling back to the policy that is helping support all of this area, Philip mentioned earlier the targets that have been published in the National Waste Management Plan. They are statutory targets, and our statutory national reuse target, hooray, is 20 kilos per person. So that's double our current baseline figure, at least. So we have to double our reuse in 6 years, which means adding 50,000 extra tons capacity to our reuse sector at the moment. So we have a very ambitious target. It's very exciting, and it means we have lots of potential to really grow. The plan also includes a commitment to introducing a repair target. We're not quite sure how that will be measured yet, but it'll be really interesting to find out. Our green public procurement strategy that was also mentioned recently also commits to introducing a target for procurement of repaired and reused goods within 3 years. So that will also drive reuse and repair. And then other measures include, for example, a target for more reuse facilities and recycling centres and collection services for repair. Of course, we need an enabling environment for all of this, and Philip mentioned a lot of these things. We do have good networks, of course, Community Resources Network, which is the sister network to NIRN, as well as the EPA network, which includes a wider group of stakeholders, advisory groups. We have the strategy, as I mentioned. CRNI has developed a quality mark and virtual trade fair for procurement. We have really good, strong research funding from the EPA to continue to underpin that evidence work that we need to see more reuse happening and structural supports. But as you can see, the targets are very challenging. So we have a lot more to do. Circling back to people that I mentioned earlier, we really need to find ways to bring that mainstream audience along with us to engage in reuse and repair. It's no good just passing things on to charity shops or running repair cafes. We need people to come along and engage in them. And we're really delighted to be working with the department on a national platform for the circular economy, which is all about communicating and engaging communities and delivering and supporting others to communicate the work that they're doing. We also need to foster that enabling environment for practitioners. How do we grow by 50,000 tons capacity our reuse. How do we double our current reuse levels? So we've talked already quite a number of occasions about financial supports. We need to see supports for labour activation to support the very active social enterprise community in this space. More green procurement, especially at smaller scale, where a lot of social enterprises are operating. And we need to be really careful with the introduction of any new policy measures, especially European ones, and how that impacts on our existing thriving reuse and repair sector. And lastly, we need investment in infrastructure. We need to build a lot of back-end services, supports, sorting centres, warehousing, to support reuse and repair as a priority over recycling and waste. And lastly, we need more research. Of course, I would say that because I love research, but we genuinely do need to look at these figures more and find more ways to underpin policy and get more system change. So that's it for me. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much. You grab the microphones. I always feel like such a dragon, sort of nudging to people. You need to keep talking. You need to keep talking. So thank you all so much. It's been really, really interesting. I picked up sort of a few things, and just to say as well, we may have to interrupt this if the minister arrives, but we're fluid. We can go with the flow. A few things that I kind of picked up here is the issue around skills, awareness, and people. Also, of course, enabling and investment. What about that awareness? I mean, the people in this room, the skills that are on offer, the networks, how are we singing about them? How do we get people to know about these things, to come along? How important they are? Yeah, Claire, you're smiling at me.
There's lots of things in that question, I guess. First of all, the first thing I was trying to highlight there was around language and our use of language. A lot of these activities are very natural to people, but when we talk about things like circular economy and climate links, they can distance people from the actual thing that we're trying to engage on. So I think we have to really find good ways to communicate around the action, because I think people love the actions in this space. And then we need to, I suppose, look at how effective marketing companies have been in selling new products. We need to adopt those, I suppose, crudely speaking, the same approach, the same kind of effort to become clever about how we talk about this area.
Yeah, Fiona, you're nodding there.
I'm just thinking about. Well, firstly, we know that the awareness of repair cafes is relatively low, and there's similar stats in Scotland and Wales, I think. And so we mapped the repair cafes across the UK last year, and we thought there were 250 when we started. It turned out there were more than 500, and that's now grown. It's now 650 in the UK. So that's a good start. There's a place for people to find them. But then it also strikes me that kind of a lot of you will be familiar with often demand exceeds like your ability to fix, right? So can we cope with all of those 61% of people that want to go to a repair cafe? That doesn't surprise me at all, because everyone loves it if there's one in their local area. But then it's all about then kind of building up the skills and how do we get more repair cafes to meet that demand, and it sort of has to happen incrementally. But that's where you need these big injections of kind of resource and support for these initiatives to happen.
The investment enabling kind of factor that you mentioned there, Neva.
I really like the point about being proud of repair, and I think this is a key thing to really make it not a matter of it's a bit of a taboo in some cases, or people have these prejudices and it's a bit of a stigma about secondhand and repair. So I think this is a key thing on working on attitudes. In the EU, for instance, we saw during the European Year of Skills also how everything was focused only on the highest possible levels of education. And we were saying, yeah, but if you're talking about green transition that we actually need the skills of the past in a way. It's manual skills that are really needed for the green transition. And I think that's also something that we really have to reinforce. And I'll just give a small example, because I only came into my role last year. And one of the things that I found so delightful was that in one of the case studies, I invite you to read the report on skills we produced, that the repair skills that these people who had been distanced from the labor market learned for repairing the washing machines are actually directly applicable for the wind turbines. So it's also about the jobs of tomorrow that these skills are for. And I think that's another narrative that we need to work on.
Yeah, I suppose there is an element of repair being seen as the sort of poor cousin almost in a way. Philip, what do you think? I mean, you're looking at the skills gap there as well. There is a real sense of this ramping up in terms of actually being a force.
Yeah, and just on the communications piece, I mean, for us, if you want to communicate with people in a really exciting, slick, dynamic way, the last thing you do is ask civil servants to do it, because our default response will be, well, we need to put a half-page ad into the Irish Times or something like that, completely missing TikTok and social media. So we need to be much more dynamic and flexible in how we communicate and evangelize the circular economy message, and we're trying to do that through the circular economy platform and also through mywaste.ie. But it is a challenge, and it's going to require a kind of us to move out of our comfort zone and accept that we're losing a bit of control around communicating that message, but it's for a greater outcome. In terms of skills, I think it is a real challenge. It's a growing challenge, but it's an exciting challenge to have, isn't it? That we're going to require this level of resource, this level of skills available to support the circular economy transition and to meet the repair and reuse targets that we have, which Clara said are really, really exciting. So if we can provide that sort of policy certainty and a bit of funding certainty as well, then it supports people's perception of this being a thing that is going to be around for a while, and will put more people into these sorts of skills areas.
I'm intrigued a little bit around the idea of quantitative targets and measuring all of this, because some of this seems terribly informal as well. I mean, how can you keep track of that sort of thing if it's a neighbour offering to fix and all that sort of thing? That's impossible, surely, to track, isn't it?
I would just say, but you have to start from somewhere, and what gets measured gets managed, and vice versa. So there are certain tangible things that the local authorities can do, or that state operators can do in terms of supporting it. So, for example, we can put money into civic amenity sites and convert those from being sort of recycling centres to circular economy hubs. But yeah, it's a challenge. But I think if you don't start from somewhere, then you'll find an excuse to not come up with metrics.
Yeah, exactly. Fiona nodding, and Claire as well.
Yeah, I was just going to say that we were. I was having a few discussions with partners when we were doing the electrical waste reform consultation, and just talking about how the problem with how that all works is that waste is measured from the moment it kind of almost gets to the rubbish dump. It's waste. It's too late, and you need to start measuring this from the moment almost someone makes a decision about whether or not to keep something in use or not. And so you can't do it if someone's just lending something to a neighbour, or you're passing on your phone to a family member. But there are things like Freegal and FreeCycle, so you can measure a little bit of that. You can measure what happens at repair cafes. You can measure what gets repaired in small high street repair shops, and that doesn't seem to be being measured at the moment. So just if it was part of legislation that you got extra points for repairing more than reusing, and then that much more than recycling, then you'd have to figure out. And it's just, you just need people figure out if you make them. So that would be my recommendation.
Yeah, Claire, you're all about the data.
Yeah, no, absolutely. We need to be measuring where the decision point is that we can influence it. I mean, if you want to target, you have to be able to influence those decisions. So in terms of that particular study that was done on measuring reuse, it looks at what is the secondhand sales at the till, so that you're trying to measure secondhand sales and help influence and support the more sales, I suppose, as secondhand. Obviously, more is not always good, but in terms of the offset of new products, that's where the measure would be. But you can still, as the EPA did, do surveys with people to ask them if they can estimate the informal exchanges, those hand-me-downs, and get a sense of what that is. But it's not something that you would be influencing with a target in any case. So it's good to know, but it's for a different purpose.
Nina, yeah.
Yeah, I think it's difficult indeed to measure reuse, but I come from, working at the EU level, so that waste hierarchy that we saw at the beginning. So the reuse, that's basically about passing something to a neighbor or something like this. It's actually under waste prevention. So you're not even entering the management of waste. And what I think is easier to measure and what we would want to aim for in our advocacy for quantitative targets is actually preparing for reuse. So that's at the point when an item had already been, discarded in one way or another, and then through repair or another sort of process, it is prepared for reuse. But that's then an easier thing to measure, indeed, because you could measure the output of repair cafes, the donations to charity shops in your case, and so on. So I think that might work. But it's very important. I think there are differences in terms of what's considered waste in policy frameworks. In Ireland, it's a completely different story from a lot of other European countries. So then you kind of have to find the way that works in a specific context.
And then we all have to learn from each other, of course, as well. I was interested when you say about Austria having that repair bonus and how well they're doing with things, because they are number one in the world for recycling. So is there a sort of connection between that commitment to repair and reuse and a nation's circularity and recycling ability and, meeting green targets? Is there that connection between prioritising repair and actually becoming greener?
I sure would like to think so.
Yeah.
I don't have any studies on that from Austria, but I know we have a very, very active member network there, Reuse Austria, who does a tremendous job lobbying the national politicians and also implementing repair cafes and all sorts of measures. And I know it's taken a lot of efforts to achieve these breakthroughs, such as the repair bonus. But it is unfortunate indeed that in that case it's a specific amount of funding, and in fact there were cases. I think actually it happened in Vienna. So that's another thing to keep in mind when policy measures are introduced like that. That you have to ensure continuity, because what happened in one case was that a lot of staff was hired, repair was doing fantastic, and then the money ran out and it collapsed. So this is not the answer directly to your question, but I definitely think that, of course, if it comes from the highest levels of prioritizing reuse, repair, and so on, then you will see that at all other levels.
Yeah, we were chatting about that earlier as well, about the need for it to be top down, but then there is that groundswell, this network here of pushing up as well. I mean, I don't know that people realise just how powerful they actually are, but you saw that, Fiona, in Westminster, because people came, MPs realised actually we need to chat here, we need to be present, we need to hear about this.
Yeah, and that's again what was quite stark for me, coming from a climate campaigner, and we did lots of constituency campaigning, and MPs would get tired of people coming and telling them what to do in lobbies, right? But that's totally different with coming here and then kind of seeing that kind of repair cafes are the advocates. Repair cafes are already doing an amazing service to the community, right? So who wouldn't want to talk to them? So that already helps to A, show demand, B, show that this is a really important community service. And then MPs are much more likely to kind of be able to respond than just saying, I need you to do this and finger pointing. So absolutely, it's showing what's possible and showing what's wanted.
Yeah, great. Lots of nods there as well, sorry, Philip, yeah.
I think we need to find a way to make your voices cut through much more loudly than the voices of those people who are losing their minds because there's a tethered cap on their milk carton now, or because they have to bring their fluorescent
You've had this
bottles
argument in your house as well.
Yeah. So how do we make your voices drown out the voices who are, probably on the one hand saying governments aren't doing enough on climate change, but then saying, why do we have to have these ridiculous tethered caps? So we need to amplify your voice.
Yeah. Okay, great. Sorry, yes.
At the Rediscover Centre, we really focus on demonstration. It is a demonstration centre. I'm only there 2.5 years, so I don't really claim any stake in the development of it. But you see people walk in every day with this huge face of inspiration, and it's really exciting to see that every time. So it's all about showcasing, showing, giving examples, just giving a way in for people to see what they can actually do in a really practical sense. So it is, very powerful to have that demonstration. And just on, the bonus scheme and VAT, and there's a lot of ways we can introduce individual incentives that might run out after a certain time. I do think we need to look at the economy as a whole and see where are all of the subsidies that are undermining this work, and where are all the incentives that are supporting it, and where are all the things that we could be doing with repair and with secondhand instead of new, and try and take a more holistic approach to see what actually needs to structurally change.
Sorry, just a little microphone malfunction there. Are there questions in the room? Oh, look at all the hands flying up. I love it. Okay. It was a bit of a race between yourself, Sue, and Dan. So whichever one would like to go first. And are we dishing out a microphone or just get people to yodel? Yeah.
I think coming back to what the last point, I'm seeing more and more traditional businesses putting, especially fashion businesses, putting up, recycle your garment here, bring your jeans back, and la 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 la, Marks and Spencer's and next, and so on. How much of that is real, and how much of that is greenwashing, do we think? And how can we shift from the greenwashing to the real? Where can we build the capacity? I'd be really fascinated in your thoughts on that, because it really seems to have popped up recently.
If I may, I think the fact that mostly they will dish out vouchers in exchange for that goes to show how real it is, right? Because it's basically stimulating further consumption. And we also talk about how, they say, oh yeah, bring this to us and we will, find it the next home. But that's a key point in my advocacy and our advocacy, is that social enterprises are in fact the only actors in these value chains that prioritize local reuse. And producers, indeed, that's an applause for yourselves. Mm-hmm. But producers effectively, they want to produce more and sell more. So it's counter to their fundamental business model to try to reduce, So I would say it's largely greenwashing, but I know it's not necessarily a popular opinion, but I'm sure in this room it is.
Yeah, Fiona, yeah.
I would say absolutely we need to be careful about greenwashing. When you've got Primark saying that they're circular because they're teaching people how to sew on a button. No, but I know they do it. Yeah, so that's clearly greenwashing. But things like Marks and Spencer offering a repair service in store feels positive. It's not linked to buying a new product. And I think the thing is, it's that kind of we're not going to fix the system with only people who are squeaky clean, right? We need the dominant players to slowly shift. So it's about shifting business models. And, where like Selfridges have a target to be, I think it's 50% circular by 2030, So if you start seeing those big picture targets, then I feel like it's real. And that's where kind of you want to be supporting them to do it. But it's just when it's really tokenistic and linked to buying new, then you kind of know it's greenwash.
This one here, because Siobhan asked me that question, how do we get from now to the future? How do we, and you guys seem to be really fighting the how. And giving the tools for the how. Yeah. So how do we? Yeah.
Okay. Thanks so much, Sue. With question from Dan. There's a few other hands going up there as well.
As a question for Claire and Phil. As a member of the Lions Environmental Group, could I mention a recent land project involving nearly 8,000 students, which was a climate crisis awareness session for post-primary schools in Ireland. How would you see the involvement of Lions in Ireland helping you achieve your waste action plan and the enabling environment?
That's community connection, isn't it?
So, as I was saying earlier on, over the last 5 years or so, we've had a very strong emphasis on bringing in the broader stakeholder environment to support us in developing waste action plan, developing the circular economy strategy, and then in implementation as well. So there's a seat at the table for anybody really in terms of informing the next iteration of the circular economy strategy and the ongoing work that we're doing on the waste action plan. One of the great things that arose from COVID was that not sure. Oh, it is okay. That when we first started our waste advisory group, which was about informing the development of the waste action plan, we were kind of constrained by the kind of the physical constraints of meeting rooms and the numbers of people who could attend, etc. But COVID completely opened that up, and we now have about 50 or 60 people coming to quarterly meetings. So the more voices that are in the room, the better. And as I say, we made it clear to all stakeholders in the Waste Advisory Group at the start that this isn't just us doing the work here. We need you. We want your expertise, and we want you to evangelise for the work that we're doing together externally. Just on the piece, sorry if I may go back to your question. Demand management is a key part, not just in terms of circular economy, although I think circular economy includes energy anyway, but when you think of, for example, what needs to be done in terms of energy efficiency and reducing energy use, demand management is a key part there as well. So again, it's incumbent upon governments and all stakeholders to take on the responsibility to do that bit around demand management, because the circular economy transition is about, for me, it's about managing consumption and production in ways that make the planet a livable place for 11 billion people. So the demand side, I think we sometimes forget. It's probably the more difficult piece.
I'm keen to get one more quick question in just before the Minister arrives, so this gentleman's been very patient here.
I just want to make a point rather than a question. There's an empty chair here today, and that is those people who make a living from repair. Most of the people here today are largely repair cafes. But it's linked to the economy, and it's linked to the sustainability of something. Where we do have in Northern Ireland businesses who operate in total repair of things, and their voices, I don't think, are heard in the middle of it.
Is that a bit of the...
That's something that needs to be enhanced in a sense.
Is that something where education comes in around the skills gap that there is in repair skills for yourselves as government? Yeah, it's good.
Just to come back to the repair directory that we have, repairmystuff.ie was an effort to try and show what local repair services are available. It needs a lot more promotion still and a lot more work, but there are 1,300 repair organisations on it. And as part of the Right to Repair Directive now, and the other one, ESP, what's it called? Sustainable Products Regulation or something. Both of those are going to require that member states have directories. And so there's going to be a lot more focus on it and making sure that it's used. I mean, it's one thing to put a directory out on a platform, and it's another thing to get people to use it. So we do need people to actually look at it. But that is trying to highlight, I suppose, who's out there doing repairs and drive people towards them.
I think the issue for me was that there was always, in certainly our repair cafe, a slight concern that you might be taking work away from businesses who are making a living at this, and that's counterproductive in the longer term.
Again, it's all that just transition and fairness and representation and everything. Great. So look, I'd just like to offer our thanks to everybody on the panel here. Philip Nugent, Neva Nattigal, Fiona Dare and Claire Downey. Thank you very much indeed.